Writing a great novel is as much about what you don't do as it is about what you do. It's as much about what isn't in your story as it is about what's in your story. This is the concept of inversion, something that's been applied by many different people in all sorts of different fields. Instead of thinking about how to achieve a positive desired outcome, inversion involves considering the negative outcome associated with whatever it is you're pursuing and trying to avoid that. Instead of asking how you get rich, instead ask how do you avoid becoming poor. Instead of asking how do I have a happy marriage, ask how do I avoid getting a divorce. Instead of asking how do I write a great novel, instead ask how do I avoid writing a bad novel. I thought it would be interesting if we applied this idea of inversion thinking to writing a novel and think about some of the things that you shouldn't do when writing one. Some of the things that you should avoid if you don't want to write a novel that isn't good. God, the double negatives and stuff in this video are just driving me nuts. Speaking of something positive, consider subscribing to my channel. The videos will hopefully negate some of the enjoyment that you don't not have in your life right now. All right, the first mistake that can lead to writing a bad novel: only reading good novels. How can you avoid writing a bad novel if you don't know what a bad novel looks like? There's a lot to be learned from the best sellers out there and the legendary writers of the past, but there's just as much to be learned from those who aren't quite considered legendary. This doesn't just apply to the straight up quality of the work that you're reading, it also applies to your preferences towards it. If you only read the genres and types of stories and authors that you like and never explore beyond that, how can you truly understand what it is about a particular genre or a particular author's style that you like? It could be argued that in order to know what you do like, you also need to experience some things that you don't like. What you read as a writer is a matter of great importance, and arguments can be made for both hyper-focus into a specific area that you want to improve or taking a more broader approach. I tend to lean on the side of variety, getting as much exposure to as many different styles and sorts of novels as you can. Being able to identify what goes into a good piece of work is as important as identifying what's missing from lackluster work. And in order to build that skill, you need to gain some experience with some lackluster novels, or at least novels that are outside of the area that you want to write in. The next thing that you should avoid in order to not produce a bad novel: adding too much into your novel. It's very easy to mistake complexity for depth. Your novel might be weighed down by what's already inside of it rather than what it's lacking. And keeping the things that are dragging it down, even if you add in some other stuff that's really good, will still bring down the overall potential of the story. A novel might have problems not because it doesn't have enough good stuff in it, but because it has a few bad things in it. This can happen at the plot level, at the scene level, or even down to the prose level. Sometimes the best way to improve a passage is to cut a sentence out of it. Sometimes removing an entire scene will improve an entire novel. Good writing is as much about what's not said or what's implied as it is about what's actually directly said in the work. The most impactful parts of writing are usually caused by revelations that the reader themselves experiences, rather than something that's directly read from the work. One concrete example of this at a prose level is telling and then showing. This happens when you state some kind of attribute or emotion that the character is feeling before demonstrating that attribute or emotion through the actions that they take. Bob was angry. He stormed into his office, slamming the door hard enough to knock his framed Insurance Salesman of the Year award off the wall. His fury then turned to the keyboard, which he ripped free from his generic Dell desktop computer and hurled across the room. That's not a great paragraph. I didn't have the time or the energy to write a good one, but it can be made better by removing the Bob was angry right at the start, as this is a fact that's clearly demonstrated by the ensuing actions. In this case, this paragraph is telling the reader that Bob is angry, and then also showing the reader that Bob was angry. Next thing to avoid in your novel is any sort of reader confusion. Good novels are clear about what's going on. They are clear about who the characters are. They are clear about what sort of setting things are taking place in. They are clear about the problems and the conflict of the plot. Anytime you move towards confusing the reader, no matter what it's about, your story is going to suffer. In a lot of lackluster novels, I don't think it's a case that the characters themselves are necessarily bad or that the plot is uninteresting. It's just that these things haven't been properly communicated to the reader. Your character might be a devoted father and a caring partner who treats his coworkers with respect, but if this is not clearly communicated to the reader, then they won't know what's going on, they won't understand this character, and they probably won't like the novel. This is part of the problem when people get overly focused on the idea that they have for their novel. Ideas are easy enough to come up with, but when you imagine an idea, you're imagining all of the emotional beats and feelings that come along with that idea. You are naturally excited about the idea because you know what feelings it's meant to evoke in you. But getting the reader equally excited about it is where the actual magic happens. That's the true challenge of writing. And a major step towards doing that is making your writing clear. If the reader can understand the attributes of your characters, if they recognize that your setting is pre-industrial, if they recognize that the evil wizard seizing the golden amulet means that all beef on the planet will turn to vegan beef, then they'll understand your story, they're more likely to connect with it, and they will feel the things that you want them to feel. This might be a bit of a hot take, but I think a mediocre or tropey story that does a good job of clearly communicating what's going on with the reader is better than the best idea that is so poorly written that the reader doesn't understand what's going on. Actually, having just said that, I don't think that's a hot take at all. I think that makes perfect sense. Your focus should always be on understanding what it is the reader is feeling as they read through a particular part of your story. The quality of everything behind that is almost a secondary consideration. As long as the reader understands what's going on and you're clearly communicating that, that will take you a lot further. And the last thing to avoid if you want to not write a bad novel, I think, quitting or giving up. Success in so many things in life basically just boils down to not stopping doing that thing. Persistence in writing pays off a ton. I struggle to believe that someone who sits in front of a novel writing for a few years consistently, who gets regular critique, who reads regularly and maybe learns about some craft stuff here and there when needed, that should make anybody into a halfway decent writer. The seed of your literary greatness will grow on its own. You just need to tend to it for long enough. No great novel was written by somebody who quit halfway through. Nobody has ever improved the writing craft by delaying getting started or not doing their practice. This is not sexy advice. I'm incapable of delivering sexy advice, but it's kind of true. Just sticking with it, not quitting, putting the time in day after day, month after month, year after year is like 90% of this stuff. There are times to quit and times to move on from certain projects. There are times to take breaks, and just doing more work does have diminishing returns at some point, but pushing through, getting the practice in, and just not quitting, just keeping showing up is a huge part of things. A lot of what needs to happen will just sort of happen on its own as long as you put the time in, but 99% of people don't. They don't give the process the time it needs. They quit before things have had a chance to improve. All of the stuff that you can do to improve your writing doesn't matter if you quit. Not quitting is the fundamental foundation of everything else. I think that of all the things you want to avoid when it comes to writing a good novel, quitting or stopping or not getting started are at the top of the list, which is ironic because they were at the end of the list on this video. Speaking of end of list video things, we're at the end of this video. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this video and found the advice in it useful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.